We're those guys. We want to be your guys following the latest in a free agency frenzy, as we'll call it, because I love the alliteration. I'm Alex Hardy, joined as always by Nick Ferguson. What's going on, Nick Ferg?
Hey man, it's cold out here in Denver.
Well, I'll look at the sunny palm trees outside my window and then
Uh,
keep the rest
How
of it to
dare you?
myself.
How dare you?
So, a lot of envy amongst NFL fans regarding free agency with everything opening. Last episode, our Russell Wilson episode, in case you missed that, kind of kicked things off a little bit early. And it's funny with this 48-hour tampering period, the NFL news cycle starts to dominate Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when free agency opens, and we still have so many remaining free agents left. But where we sort of left our conversation with Russell Wilson, we saw other quarterbacks on the move. None more important than Kirk Cousins signing the 4-year, $180 million, but $100 million guaranteed contract to the Atlanta Falcons, plus Atlanta adding another weapon and handing Darnell Mooney a 3-year, $39 million contract. So the Atlanta Falcons are going to roll in with a new head coach under that Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan system, and Raheem Morris, having been there in Washington, and then most recently serving as the defensive coordinator for the Rams. You add in Kirk Cousins and the weapons of Drake London and Kyle Pitts and last year's first-round pick in Bijan Robinson, plus the addition of Darnell Mooney. What do you think that this Falcons offense looks like compared to, let's say, the situation Kirk Cousins just left in Minnesota?
Well, I'll say this: it should look that much better because when you look at Kirk Cousins and the numbers that he was able to amass as a member of the Vikings, a lot of that happened because he's a volume passer. We know that's going to happen with those Vikings teams because, or those teams that Kirk Cousins played on, because typically he's playing from behind. But the
Right.
biggest thing and the benefit for Kirk Cousins was he had Dalvin Cook. And when you have a guy like that, you can just throw it to him in the flat and he can give you an explosive. That helps your offense, but it helps your offensive stats as well. And now you insert that guy into the Atlanta Falcons offense with Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, who I thought was phenomenal as a rookie last year.
Yeah.
Just so you're really surrounding Kirk with talent. He's definitely one of those quarterbacks who needs talent around him. But you brought up something that I think is highly important to point out here, Alex, is the fact that you look at Kirk Cousins. Where has he been his entire career? He's been basically in the same system his entire career.
Correct.
From when he was with the Commanders with Kyle and Mike Shanahan, then when he was with the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell, and now again under Zach Robinson with the Atlanta Falcons. So look, I'm all for every guy making as much money as possible, but we don't really know what Kirk can really be because he's been in the same system and been a benefactor of that system. So it is great for the Falcons and Raheem, who's coached on both sides of the field, but we have to see what's going to happen in the long run. And more importantly, Kirk Cousins is in the NFC South. Let's be totally honest.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that division is a cakewalk, but we've seen Sean Payton and Drew Brees dominate that conference, that division for so many years. So we'll have to see, but I think there's a guy down in Tampa by the name of Baker Mayfield who's saying, we're going to say something about how well the Falcons do this season.
Right. The Buccaneers essentially running it back. And, what Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield and Antoine Winfield and Levante David, it's amazing to see guys play in one uniform. I'm not talking about Baker, but Mike Evans and Levante David, key pieces that have been there for a decade at this point, while adding other pieces like Jordan Whitehead. And I think that's really the only outside free agent they've done so far. So they've made a priority to retain their guys. And really, that's sort of the concern on both sides, right? The Minnesota Vikings had a bunch of star skill players in Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook that were on rookie deals. And to take advantage of that, they went and spent big money on Kirk Cousins. And in 5 years, I did want to point out that his first 3 years in Minnesota was under Mike Zimmer before Kevin O'Connell came in. So I think that was the one time he wasn't necessarily in the Shanahan system. But
Oh no,
besides the
he was. He
with Steve
was.
Filippo,
No, not DiFilippo, but he had Gary Kubiak, and then Gary Kubiak retired, and then his son Clint Kubiak took over. So he's been in this system for a long time.
totally fair. Yeah, absolutely. So Kirk's familiarity, but I'm getting a familiar sense in the Atlanta Falcons with their skill players on rookie deals. Are we doing the same thing over again where the Vikings wanted to take advantage of an expensive quarterback with the skill players making rookie contract money, and they have one playoff win to show for it in 5 seasons? Kirk Cousins goes because they're paying Justin Jefferson now and TJ Hawkinson and bringing in veterans like Aaron Jones we'll get to. But now the Falcons have this limited window before they need to get to the negotiating table with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and making huge decisions with some of their key players.
Yeah, that is true. Glad that you
I'm having deja vu, I think is my point.
well, it is definitely deja vu. But when you think about a lot of NFL franchises, it's almost like they have this handbook of how to organize a team. And it starts by either having a rookie quarterback, and then you can go out and sign veterans, or you bring in a high priced veteran at the quarterback position, and then you pay everyone else on a rookie pay scale peanuts in hopes that it's going to get you to where that you need to be. But the biggest question I have for the Atlanta Falcons and Kirk Cousins, or better yet, the comparison. From here on out, Kirk Cousins will be compared to Matt Ryan because Matt Ryan won an MVP in the Falcons uniform. He got them to a Super Bowl. He was, a quarter and a half away from winning it. But if it wasn't for your, pesky Patriots, that would have been different.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yes, that's kind of what happened for sure. So Kirk Cousins will be measured by the numbers that Matt Ryan put up. And this is not one of those cases where Kirk Cousins has been able to escape, ridicule and criticism by throwing for an ungodly amount of numbers, sort of like another guy that kind of fits the mold, and that would be Tony Romo.
So Matt Ryan out in Atlanta at 36 years old. Kirk Cousins in, coming off the Achilles injury at 36 years old. Interesting to see. And that NFC South may be feisty and competitive, even if it only takes the first to 10 wins to win that division. The first couple of days of the tampering period mixed into free agency, the running back market was one of the more lucrative positions. I think it's all in context because when the salary cap goes up about $30 million, you have a little bit more coin to spend on what we've been told is not necessarily a premium position. So maybe we have to take Derrick Henry and the move to Baltimore out of the equation, considering what a great match and pair that is on paper. But of all the running backs on the move, Josh Jacobs, a 4-year, $48 million contract to Green Bay, Saquon Barkley to the Philadelphia Eagles, and you have other pieces like the Houston Texans, moving Devin Singletary, releasing him rather, trading for Joe Mixon. Singletary ends up replacing Saquon with the Giants. What is one of your favorite fits on paper, at least, for a running style matched with a team that looks to put an emphasis on the ground game?
Boy, it's two teams that run similar styles of offense, and they do come from that Shanahan tree. You look at Matt LaFleur, and you think about Jordan Love and everything that everyone said about him being a bust. But when LaFleur realized that Jordan Love was Jordan Love and wasn't Aaron Rodgers, he changed the offense, and now we're talking about Jordan Love possibly getting getting a huge deal from the Green Bay Packers. But you add Josh Jacobs to that offense, and with Aaron Jones last year, I go back to that game against the Dallas Cowboys and how they utilized his ability to run between the tackles and get him out on the perimeter. That changed a lot as far as what the Packers offense could use. But now you have a bigger, stronger, more durable guy and Josh Jacobs. So that's one team to watch out for. The other one was, and it's funny that you mentioned the Devin Singletary thing, was Joe Mixon going down to join CJ Stroud in Houston. And think about it. CJ Stroud, surprised so many people this year especially after his S2 scores were leaked and it was said that, well, he's not going to be
Right. The end all be all.
yeah, he's not projected to be a great quarterback because of those scores. He proved everyone wrong. And I'm glad that he did. I liked him coming out of Ohio State, but you add Joe Mixon to the mix. Once again, almost like what LaFleur is doing. You got a guy in Joe Mixon who can catch the ball out of the backfield, but he also can grind it out too if you need to play those close games against a team like Baltimore or Jacksonville. Joe Mixon can give you those type of yards. And then you add that skill from the running back standpoint with Nico Collins and Tank Dell. I mean, for me, it's going to be extraordinary. And I'll add this. No quarterback ever wins to get to a point in his career by himself. It is competent quarterback play, running the ball, but great defense. Now you got Daniel Hunter on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Will Anderson, think about how many extra possessions that's going to equal for CJ Stroud. So those are the two teams I'm going to be looking at. And those are the two teams I think really hit it out of the park in free agency with their acquisitions.
I was going to wait until later, but I think you've got a perfect mentioning Danielle Hunter. I have so many questions, but I'll just limit it to this regarding the Houston Texans. Instead of retaining their own Jonathan Grenard, who is a great run stuffer, kind of a do-it-all guy that was able to thrive in DeMeco Ryans' defensive scheme, he goes to Minnesota, and Danielle Hunter from Minnesota moves to Houston, basically swap for one another.
Right.
But because it's essentially a $50 million fully guaranteed contract, well, I'm sorry, they're $1 million short of fully guaranteeing it because we don't do fully guaranteed contracts.
Right.
You showed us, just give them the $1 million. But that's besides the point. For the window that the Texans have, and it being just a 2-year deal for Danielle Hunter, which coincidentally, after 2 years, when CJ Stroud is eligible for that second contract extension, is this the window that the Houston Texans are planting their flag? And to steal a quote from Jerry Jones, they're going all in.
Absolutely. Just look at the surprise that we saw this past season. Quarterback.
Yeah, picked last in the division before the year.
Yeah, and the rookie offensive coordinator, and look how far they were able to get. I mean, we're talking about maybe a game away from playing in the AFC Championship game. Whoever would have thought that that was possible with a rookie quarterback, but they were able to do it. But they realized, hey, listen, the problem that they had against Baltimore was they brought pressure, something that DeMeco Ryans doesn't do in the defense, and that's not the staple of the defense that he learned. But he realizes, no, we need to be able to get after the quarterback. And if we can do that just with our guys up front, that adds an extra defensive guy to roam across the middle and steal passes. So this Hunter move with Anderson, it could be something that's problematic for opposing quarterbacks, but just enough to get them where they need to get to.
That's right. And in addition to adding Danielle Hunter, they added some interior line depth. Nico Autry coming over from Dallas, just really going to solidify that defensive end while they were adding more and more pieces to the offense while retaining guys like Dalton Schultz. And really, I think, frankly, Joe Mixon's running style was a poor fit in Cincinnati in the last couple of years. And as that true north-south runner for a Bobby Slowick offense like Kyle Shanahan that loves to run on first and second down, they'll be successful in the run and thereby be more like CJ Stroud's play action passing can really unlock that offense when we're in search of big plays. The one running back I didn't mention when we started talking about that cluster of money being handed out was Tony Pollard to the Tennessee Titans. And that was their first big move in free agency. And then once free agency became official, and that was in due part because of what the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to send back to the Atlanta Falcons, Calvin Ridley, 4 years, $92 million and $50 million guaranteed. So that offense gets an injection of Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, Lloyd Cushenberry coming from your Denver Broncos, Mason Rudolph to be a backup for Will Levis. Have they done enough, or is this a good job by the Tennessee Titans to give Will Levis support to try to build him on what they're calling the sophomore season for their franchise quarterback?
Yeah, Rand Carthon has done a great job thus far. I know Will Levis is still taking a lot of criticism, but Go back and watch that game against the Miami Dolphins. He really showed the level of skill and the level of toughness. And Rand saw that and was like, hey, listen, we're just missing a couple of pieces here and there to be somewhat competitive. And knowing as though we're looking at what the Texans are doing in that same division, you have
Right.
to find ways to compete. Yep. No, you don't get that blunt force trauma that you received with Derrick Henry, but it's being more explosive from that running back position. Once again, think about what we were talking about earlier, Kirk Cousins. We talked about Matt LaFleur. We talked about Bobby Sloan in Houston, Texas. It's somewhat of the same kind of blueprint and plug and play type of guys. Now you have Newt Hopkins, you have Calvin Ridley, you have a quarterback that's mobile who can throw the ball, who can affect the defense both vertically and horizontally, and you have Pollard who you can hand the ball to, or you can dump it to him in the flats. It's
Right.
all about creating an arsenal that can make defensive coordinators stay up at night. And I think the Texans are doing that, with their roster. And now Rand Carthon being another guy who spent time in San Francisco,
Yeah.
he knows what it looks like.
I'm sensing a theme. I've made this joke to you, I don't know how many times on the podcast, but with 2/3 of the league coming from San Francisco or Shanahan or that tree, we're going to see a lot of redundancy and certain players prioritize as we watch guys like Kirk Cousins go from different Shanahan systems one to the next. It's important to note we're talking about competition in the NFC South and the AFC South with the moves that they've made so far. The NFC East had their first back-to-back division winner in nearly 20 no, they didn't. They didn't even do it yet. We haven't had a back-to-back division winner in the NFC East for how long? My lifetime? I'm 33
You're
years old.
trying to forecast it, trying to put it out there in the universe.
Well, listen, they're all, for the most parts, out there swinging. And then you look at the New York Giants, who made a big swing of their own because Saquon Barkley to the Eagles is huge. I selfishly, for fantasy football purposes, I'm talking about the tush push being a Jason Kelsey play. So I like Saquon Barkley from the 1 yard line more than I like Jalen Hurts from the 1 yard line. But I digress. The Eagles have gotten better. The Cowboys are letting their guys go to Dan Campbell. Well, they did add Eric Kendricks, reuniting with Mike Zimmer. But the New York Giants are interesting because with the moves that they've made so far, there's one that's a little incongruent with the rest of them, and it's their biggest splash of all. They've added Drew Lock from the Denver Broncos. We mentioned Devin Singletary, a swing tackle, and Jermaine Illuminor, who could start, and at $7 million a year for your left tackle or right tackle if Evan Neal works out, that's serviceable. But then they make the big swing, trading the 39th overall selection to the Carolina Panthers for Brian Burns and then adding him on a 5-year, $150 million extension. He's a win now type of player, and the Giants don't necessarily look to be there with their own cap purgatory because of what they gave to Daniel Jones instead of Saquon Barkley a year ago. So the addition of Brian Burns, is it just a premier player at a premium position and the Giants had to go for it because, frankly, the Panthers gave up more to acquire Sam Darnold 2 years ago than they just got in return for Brian Burns? Was the asking price too good, or the Giants just want to get a player who's ready for a win now team where the rest of the roster isn't quite there?
That was an act of desperation, knowing as though your quarterback and Daniel Jones, you paid him significantly instead of playing a guy like Saquon Barkley, who is now gone to your division rival.
Right.
So they needed something to balance things off. And once again, it's the New York Giants. It's the G-Man. I mean, you're in the Big Apple.
Big
So
Blue.
you wanted to make somewhat of a big splash because you knew that when you were losing a marquee player in Saquon Barkley, and you wanted to make the fan base feel happy about something because your offense might stink again. So if you got Kevon Thibodeau on one side and Brian Burns on the other, you hope that it's enough to neutralize the Cowboys, whatever the Commanders do at the quarterback position. But more importantly, the team that is your biggest threat and probably your biggest rival in the Philadelphia Eagles. So you needed something or someone to help balance things. And for me, that was one of those games I am going to circle on my calendar. I hope that it's a Sunday night or Monday night game. Both times the Eagles face off against the Giants. And I
Well,
want
let's not
Tiki.
put the Giants in too many primetime games, okay?
Well, I don't want to, but just for the mere factor of just seeing what was going to happen. right? And I definitely want when Saquon Barkley goes back to MetLife Stadium, I want Tiki Barber right there on the sidelines. I want
Oh
to
yeah,
see what that exchange is going to be because I thought Tiki Barber was totally wrong in saying
yeah,
so. Hey, listen, basically kind of diminishing and undermining Saquon Barkley like you're no longer a giant. First of all,
yeah.
we know
He
how
said
this
to him,
works.
yeah,
No, I mean, come on, man. We know how this works. The Giants had an opportunity to give Saquon whatever money they thought he earned, but they didn't do it. So he
no.
opted to go to a place that has a better offensive line, arguably a better quarterback. He was just the missing piece. So I can't wait to see that clash.
Yeah, this coming from the guy who will leave the off-field stuff. You can Google him and figure that out yourself. But he retired saying that he did not like the direction of the Giants, and they won the Super Bowl the next year. I was happy for Michael Strahan.
Mm,
Well, even still, I forget who they beat. I don't really remember what happened, but
mm.
for Tiki
Make
to
sure
walk
you
out like
make
that.
sure you got that one.
If you do want to find out, make sure you listen to those guys recapping the Patriots Dynasty documentary on Apple TV. Every week, we recap the latest that you get from the documentary from the perspective of myself, Alex Hardy, a Patriots fan, and Nick Ferguson, a former NFL safety who was lining up against Tom Brady in his NFL debut with those New York Jets. And we also, for whatever reason, the camera kind of cuts off for one of this big play he made with the Denver Broncos. Like Champ Bailey was on his way to the end zone, and then the camera just cuts. So I don't know what happened there. Must have scored. I'm going to make a cut for myself there. And I want to wrap things up before we get to Nick, before we split. There's so much action that's still yet to come here in free agency, but I know that even more exciting than free agency for fans and teams in general is the NFL draft. And I kind of want to position us, Nick, to look at the top of the draft, the first three picks with the Chicago Bears, with that Panthers selection, the Washington Commanders, number two, and the New England Patriots picking third. Based, we'll go team by team kind of quickly here. Based on their moves, I want us to figure out if they're getting closer to ultimately drafting their future franchise quarterback, their signal caller, based on the moves that we've seen so far. And then we're certainly, as we continue here on those guys, going to position. Nick's going to be grinding tape. I'm going to bring my own opinions as well as to what we think of the quarterback and other elite prospects at the receiver position, offensive line. And we might even get a defensive player in the top 10. We might. We just might. Starting with the Chicago Bears, Nick, they retained Jalen Johnson. They which was a big deal for them, a player that they had franchised. Then they make a big splash, DeAndre Swift on a 3-year deal. They trade for Ryan Bates. They sign Kevin Byard, Jonathan Owens for the secondary, and they've got a quarterback on the roster, Brett Rippon. So, with what they've done so far in free agency, how does that align with picking first overall, knowing that Justin Fields hasn't gone anywhere yet?
It just shows that they realized that, they had some options from a defensive standpoint. They added Montrez Sweat from the Commanders in the
Last year,
spring
yeah.
last year and gave him a new deal. And he performed better than expected. So they're trying to build the monster of the midway again from a defensive standpoint.
That sounds good.
So great additions, but the biggest issue is what they're going to do at the quarterback position. And I have to say, I really don't trust the Bears because no matter who has been the GM, Ryan Pace, Poles, or anyone before them, they've never made great decisions when it came to the quarterback position, and they never really surrounded that quarterback with talent. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. But I can tell you this: Trevor Simeon is not going to be the guy that leads them anywhere. It's going to have to be a Justin Fields or a Caleb Williams.
Yeah, it's interesting because we really have, I believe this is year 2 with Kevin Warren, the former Big Ten commissioner who now comes in as the president and chief executive officer, leading their front office for decades were non-football people. So I'm curious to see where the direction goes now that he's looking to put his stamp on that organization. And as far as Justin Fields, he's not going anywhere just yet. The fact that Caleb Williams did not do his medicals at the combine, listen, We saw it on the field. It's not an injury rap sheet as long as Michael Penix is or anyone's, but you just have to do your due diligence and make sure that everything checks out with Caleb before you move on from a guy like Justin Fields. So whether it's tempering the market or not having the medicals, I do believe that it's Caleb Williams with the first overall selection to the Chicago Bears, not trading that pick, but we're not going to see a Justin Fields trade. I wouldn't hold your breath for it. The Washington Commanders picking second overall. They have a new coach in Dan Quinn coming from the Cowboys, and you see that with their acquisitions, getting a few guys formerly of the Cowboys, including the starting center. They add another backup quarterback in Marcus Mariota. Their splashes have kind of been at tertiary positions. Austin Eckler to pair with Brian Robinson as Antonio Gibson is on the move. We'll get to him shortly, while adding Nick Allegretti, who won a Super Bowl on the offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs, and then other pieces on mostly one-year deals like Jeremy Chin, Cleveland Farrell, and the kicker, Broncos legend Brandon McManus. So sitting second overall, based on what you've seen with this brand new organization, new ownership, new head coach, new general manager, Adam Peters coming from the 49ers organization, do they look like they're positioning themselves to have their pick of either Jaden Daniels or Drake May?
Absolutely. And just add the fact that they just recently traded Sam Howell
That's
to
right. That's the latest news. Yeah,
Yes,
if
to
you
the
can fill us in, Nick.
Seattle Seahawks. So that opens the window. And I think having a guy like Marcus Mariota there, breaking case of emergency, is a guy who's very mobile. And you got to think about what Cliff Kingsbury wants to do from that quarterback position. So for me, while everyone's kind of penciled Drake May into that slot, I think that's more of a spot for Jaden Daniels because he fits more of what Cliff Kingsbury wants to do, especially once again knowing as though you just added Marcus Mariota, who is a dual threat quarterback, to that of the mix. So the idea is start the basic building blocks, try to establish a competitive team, and then see what you have or what you need or what your needs are in 2025. But I like what the Commanders have done thus far.
Now, re-signing your own players is a good thing, but for the New England Patriots, bringing back the majority of a 4-win team from a year ago, let's see how you feel about this, Nick Ferguson. Mike Onwenu, Kyle Duggar, and Hunter Henry were 3 of their biggest free agents and 3 of their biggest positional needs, and they're all coming back. The Onwenu deal compared to some of the other guard money that went around, part of that being the Carolina Panthers having to pay out their nose to convince guys to come to a 1-win team. The Onwenu deal, 3 years, $57 million for a guy that's played 3 of the offensive line positions so far, I think is great value for them, and he's an excellent player. They retained Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Henry, Anthony Jennings, Kyle Duggar on the 1-year transition tag, understanding they saved themselves a couple $1 million based on the safety market. Jacoby Brissett comes back after being drafted by this team, and they add other pieces. Chuck Okorafor from the Steelers. Oh, I forgot Josh Uche, the pass rusher, who had 11 and a half sacks in 2022, is back. Austin Hooper, the tight end, and then a couple linebackers and Sion Taki from the Browns. Just a mix of additions, but many key re-signings, in my opinion. But now that they're sitting third overall, Jacoby Brissett is their bridge quarterback. Bailey Zappi's still under contract. Mac Jones was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 6th-round pick. How important do you think it is for the Patriots to find a quarterback at third overall or to move down and to continue adding pieces to this roster, thinking Jacoby Brissett can at least get us through 24?
I think that's kind of the idea because Gerard Mayo, obviously a lifer for the Patriots, he understands what he has in a lot of those guys, and retaining your own talent is so important. So the Patriots find themselves in a great spot. You have Jacoby Brissett, who is an excellent bridge player for the Patriots. He understands the Patriots way, and he could be that guy to lead the team until that rookie quarterback is ready. So for the Patriots and Gerard Mayo, they can actually stand where they are and draft a quarterback or say, you know what? Let's see what other teams are desperate to move up, right? And we still can get one of our guys because I'm sure they've looked at this quarterback draft class and say, look, if this is our guy number 1, who's our guy number 2 and guy number 3? and
Right.
they're willing to take that chance to move back to make that team or make this team, you know, that much better. But they're in a great position. I like the move that they made. And the Taki kid, man, I got a chance to watch him when he came to Denver playing against the Broncos. I mean, a linebacker that can get on the move and get downhill. And who's the head coach? Gerard Mayo. What position did he play?
Yeah.
Linebacker.
Like linebacker.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's trying to find someone that reminds him and have that same skill set he has. But man, what a hell of a name for a linebacker.
He's Nick Ferguson. I'm Alex Hardy. We'll get to more NFL free agency as we continue those guys, as well as looking ahead to the draft on more than just, the top three teams. But now it's time for Nick before we split. You mentioned some snow on the ground there in Denver. So, Nick, before we split, give me your favorite outdoor activity in the snow. My personal favorite, sitting inside and watch it come down. Not eligible for your choices here.
Well, Alex, I have taken a page out of your book. So I, like you, like to see it fall from the sky, but not really get involved with the activities on the snow.
Okay, so just watching your cold breath come out. That's
Yes,
that's that's Nick Ferguson.
yes,
It
that's the
happened on
most exciting thing that I'll take away.
it happened on the football field and many cold games in Denver and New York, and it also happens when you're watching your kid shovel the driveway. He's Nick Ferguson, longtime NFL safety. You can follow him at Nick Ferguson _25, breaking down tape, answering questions about his Broncos or any questions you have about your team. One of the best follows on social media. I'm Alex Hardy. Make sure you keep it locked here throughout the NFL offseason, which no days off. Thank you, Bill Belichick, as we approach the draft, continuing through free agency with a number of big names still out there. And I mentioned it before, but you can also listen to our recaps of the Patriots dynasty, the rise of Tom Brady's career, and the fall of the Bill Belichick Patriots, where there's a reason where they're picking third overall. And he's watching, from the sidelines. Sorry, no longer watching from the sidelines. Until next time, we're those guys. Nick Ferguson, what do you have to say to the people?
Hey, stay warm. And if you live in those warm places like Alex, now it's time to use your AC.
It was supposed to be 80 degrees today. I got to settle for 70.
Mm.
Ugh.
For you,